Thank goodness. Made it through another night.
what and the right and wrong of police interaction rights, and comes to us from the Southern Illinois Public Observers channel. Be sure to check out the description below and give them the credit that they deserve. Before we dive into the interaction, I would like to welcome all of you to the year 2021, and I thought I would narrate the first script of the new year just to kick things off on the right foot. The ATA narrator will return in the next episode, but so many of you have requested to hear the old voice of ATA, so this episode is dedicated to all of you. I would like to invite you all to check out the ATA Patreon page where I post ad-free can't find on YouTube. I write in, and Audit was riding along 13th Street in Centralia when he and his daughter discovered an intoxicated man lying near a railroad crossing. Mr. Flanagan's daughter immediately called 911, and the two waited there for help to arrive. Officer Billy White of the Centralia Police Department arrived on the scene moments later.
We was driving by, the man's laying here. He says somebody hit him with a car. He's obviously been drinking, but he needs some help, so I didn't want to leave until somebody got here.
I appreciate you. And when you came here, you didn't see anybody else around? Or?
You know what? There was a white vehicle on the tracks, and I think they saw him about the same time we did.
Okay.
But they went on.
But you didn't see a vehicle around or anything like that? Okay.
But his head's all busted up, and he said he hurt.
Why don't you guys go ahead and pull up to give room for the ambulance?
We're going to go on. We just wait.
Well, I need your information real quick.
What information?
Just your information real quick. Give me 1 second. Can you just pull the vehicle up for a second?
It's not my car.
Jesus Christ. Give me your IDs and I'll run it now. Everybody's got to make rocket science. You got your ID on you?
It's not my car.
You have your ID on you.
No, I do not. Why are you yelling at me whenever I'm
Because
just
you're not listening. You're not listening. I'm trying to get the ambulance here so we can get off the railroad tracks.
And we're going home.
I need your ID.
I don't have an ID.
What's your name?
I'm not giving it to you.
I'm going to put your hands behind your back. I'm going to arrest you.
Officer White first demands to see Mr. Flanagan's ID. When Mr. Flanagan says he does not have his ID, Officer White demands his name. Mr. Flanagan refuses to provide his name, and Officer White arrests him. Section 5107-14 of Chapter 725 of the Illinois Compiled Statutes gives police officers the authority to demand an individual's name when the officer reasonably infers from the circumstances that the person is about to commit, or has committed a criminal offense. Officer White did not have the authority to demand Mr. Flanagan's name under this statute because there was no evidence that Mr. Flanagan was involved in criminal activity. Section 531-4.5 of Chapter 720 of the Illinois Compiled Statutes states that an individual commits the Class A misdemeanor of obstructing identification if he or she intentionally or knowingly furnishes a false or fictitious name to a peace officer when the peace officer has good cause to believe the citizen is a witness to a criminal offense. Mr. Flanagan did not violate this statute because he did not give a false name. He simply refused to provide his name. Even if Mr. Flanagan had intentionally provided a false or fictitious name, a court would likely conclude that Officer White did not have good cause to believe that Mr. Flanagan witnessed a crime. As explained by the Illinois 2nd District Appellate Court in the 2019 case of People v. Espinillo Juarez, good cause is the functional equivalent of probable cause. As we've discussed many times on ATA, probable cause only exists when the facts and circumstances warrant a reasonable belief that a crime has been committed. In this situation, Mr. Flanagan tells the officer that he didn't see anything and that when he arrived, the potentially injured individual was already lying on the side of the road. While the individual claimed to have been hit by a car, he was intoxicated, and the video does not show any immediate apparent evidence that he had been hit. It would be more than a stretch for a court to conclude that these facts and circumstances warranted a reasonable belief that Mr. Flanagan had witnessed a crime.
And let's make everything difficult, please. You want to go sit in the county jail because you want to be an idiot.
I don't have an ID on me, just like I...
No, you don't want to give me your name, so you said arrest you. So good Lord, let's make it difficult. Makes sense.
I want to see your supervisor.
Put him in your car. Pat him down and put him in your car.
See your supervisor. I'd like to committed a crime?
Yes, you have. Obstructing justice.
When Mr. Flanagan asks if he has committed a crime, Officer White tells him that he committed the crime of obstructing justice. Section 531-4 of Chapter 720 of the Illinois Compiled Statutes states that an individual obstructs justice when intending to prevent the apprehension or obstruction of the prosecution or defense of any citizen, he or she knowingly destroys, alters, conceals, or disguises physical evidence, plants false evidence, furnishes false information, induces a witness having knowledge material to the subject at issue to leave the state or conceal himself or herself, or leaves the state or conceals himself or herself when possessing knowledge material to the subject at issue. Nothing in this statute comes close to describing Mr. Flanagan's behavior or his apparent intent. Section 531-1 of Chapter 720 creates a separate offense for resisting or obstructing a peace officer. A citizen commits this offense if he or she knowingly resists or obstructs a peace officer's performance of any authorized act within his or her official capacity. Because Officer White did not have the authority to demand Mr. Flanagan's name, Mr. Flanagan did not resist or obstruct Officer White's performance of an authorized act when he refused to provide his name. Finally, Section 531-8 of Chapter 720 criminalizes the act of refusing to aid an officer. This statute only applies if a citizen refuses or knowingly fails to reasonably aid a police officer in apprehending an individual the officer is authorized to apprehend, or in preventing an individual from committing an offense. Outside of the specific circumstances described in this statute, individuals generally are not required to assist police officers in conducting investigations.
Yeah, I mean, we're just trying to help. And the guy's yelling at me. That's what's the matter with the police force nowadays, man.
Well, let's get this figured out. And
I did absolutely nothing but call to help this guy out, and I'm sitting here in cuffs. That's all I did.
Well, what happened? What happened
I
there?
don't know. We pulled up, and the guy's laying in the middle of the road, so we called 911.
Say copy 28 of a witness.
Asking me for ID, which I told him I do not have, and I haven't been suspected of committing a crime.
What's your name?
It's Aaron.
Okay.
But there's absolutely no reason to ID me when I haven't done anything. I'm just trying to help a guy.
Whenever you called about it, did you?
I didn't even call.
Oh.
The daughter called. I was out there with the man,
They pulled
making
up
sure he was
right
all
after he
right.
was down. They didn't
Okay.
see anything, but just
All right.
first ones on
Did nothing, man.
Boy,
And here I'm sitting in cuffs because your guys. That's why. I want your supervisor out here, by the way. Get your sergeant
He's out here.
All right.
Go ahead.
That's why people record this stuff. You know that,
Last
right?
name.
Who is this guy to you, ma'am? Who is he to you?
He's my dad.
Why is he acting like this when I'm trying to get people off the railroad tracks for safety reasons?
No, sir, I'm sorry.
I just need to know who we are. That's all I'm doing. I just asking him for his name, and he don't want to give it to
We
me.
were just trying to get this man some help.
Ma'am, I appreciate that, but at the same time,
I understand.
why cause one problem when we're trying to fix another? You know what I'm
I
saying?
understand, sir.
Century, copy 28 of a witness. Aaron, wait. Aaron, listen, if you want to see I'll send you to the county jail. I'm asking for your cooperation here.
For what?
I've got squad cars on railroad tracks. I'm
Why
trying
are
to get
you
them off of
yelling at
it
me?
because you don't want to listen. I'm asking for your cooperation and you don't want to give it to me.
You know what my cooperation was? Calling and getting this man some help.
Okay, so we're going to cause another problem by not clearing the railroad tracks? I'm asking you to pull
It's not
forward.
my car.
And then I'm asking for your name so you guys can get out of here so we
For
can
no
pull
reason
forward.
at all. For no reason. You're
Yeah,
asking for
that makes sense. Hit your unlocks on your car. Aaron, I don't know why you'd want to do a good deed and not help me try to just get everybody out of here in a safe
You know what?
area.
When you started yelling at me, it was a bad deal right off the bat, so
Apparently, you don't know what it's like to do this job.
I don't want to.
I get that, but
But
I'm
what I
trying to make it safe for everybody showing up here, so we're not on railroad
Well, you
tracks
need
and
to get the
stuff.
chip off your shoulder, pal. There's no reason to be rude.
Oh no, listen, time can kill somebody. You understand that?
I'm not mad. Why are you?
I'm not mad.
Why you keep yelling at me then?
I'm not yelling.
Not right now.
Time can kill somebody. The matter of seconds can kill somebody.
I have no idea what happened to him, no more than you do.
I understand that. I'm trying to get people off the railroad tracks.
And I'm trying to go home. I just stopped to help the
Then
guy.
just help me get to the
I
end
don't
of the...
owe you anything. I don't know what your problem is.
My problem is...
Guess what? I'm clear, right? I've lived here my entire life. I want your name, your card.
It's Billy White. My badge number's 429.
Because there'll be a complaint filed. I guarantee you.
You know what? If you're going to file a complaint, we'll just charge you. Stay in there.
Officer White admits that he is only charging Mr. Flanagan because he intends to file a complaint against him. When a police officer arrests a citizen for exercising his First Amendment freedom of speech, rather than because the individual actually committed a crime, it is called a retaliatory arrest. The First Amendment prohibits government officials, like police officers, from retaliating against citizens for exercising their First Amendment rights. However, the Constitution itself does not provide any recourse for an individual who has their rights violated by a government official. The Civil Rights Act of 1871 is a federal statute found in Section 1983 of Title 42 of the United States Code. This statute allows individuals to sue government officials for violating their constitutional rights under the color of law. A government official acts under the color of law when they act in their official capacity, such as when a police officer arrests a citizen. In the 2019 case of Nieves versus Bartlett, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that to succeed in a 1983 claim, the arrested individual must not only prove that they were arrested in retaliation for protected speech, but also that the officer did not have probable cause for the arrest. While it is often challenging for an individual who sues a police officer for a retaliatory arrest to prove that the arrest was in direct retaliation for exercising a protected right, in this situation, Officer White admits multiple times that he is only arresting Mr. Flanagan because he is filing a complaint. Likewise, as we discussed earlier in this episode, Officer White did not have probable cause to arrest Mr. Flanagan because he had not committed any crimes. Under these circumstances, Mr. Flanagan should have a strong case for a Section 1983 claim.
We'll give you something to file a complaint on. Transport this one to the station. He's going to run his mouth and want to file a complaint. I'll give him something to file his complaint on. You can go to the station and bond him out.
Mr. Flanagan was taken to the local police department and essentially forced to listen to Officer White try to explain his actions. Once Officer White realized that he wasn't going to convince Mr. Flanagan that he was wrong, he released Mr. Flanagan. A few days after the encounter, Mr. Flanagan made a public records request for the body camera footage, which prompted Centralia Police Chief Greg Dodson to email the other city leaders informing them that he was going to release a statement with the video and warning them that they would likely endure criticism from the quote keyboard warriors. The following day, it was announced that Officer White would be suspended for 5 days and lose his field training officer status, along with being required to attend additional training for sensitivity and anger management. On December 10, 2020, Mr. Flanagan filed a pro se Section 1983 lawsuit against Officer White, Chief Dodson, and the city of Centralia. The lawsuit is still ongoing. Overall, Officer White and the Centralia Police Department get an F for failing to employ any measure of de-escalation, forcing Mr. Flanagan to identify himself when he had committed no crimes, and effectuating a retaliatory arrest in the absence of criminal activity. This is yet another example of an officer who set aside the legality of the situation because his ego was fractured. Officer White blatantly conducted an illegal arrest, and all of the officers involved allowed it to happen. Nothing Officer White did was truly in the interest of safety, and this interaction could have ended with the citizen getting a potentially injured man the help he needed and moving on. The misconception that officers have to identify everyone they come into contact with is rampant among the ranks of law enforcement, and the fact that Officer White was serving as a training officer is a clear indicator of why this is such a prevalent issue. Many of the other officers who responded to this interaction were likely trained by Officer White and were probably operating under the very same misconceptions. The department's response was far from adequate, especially considering that this is not the first time Officer White's reckless behavior has ended up in the headlines. In November of 2018, Officer White crashed his patrol vehicle into an unsuspecting student at a local high school while investigating a possible bomb threat. You can find a link to that encounter in the description below. Once again, the department is setting the precedent that officers who commit blatant acts of misconduct will be allowed to continue serving on the force, and this pattern of departments refusing to hold their officers accountable has to end. Mr. Flanagan gets an A+ for maintaining a respectable balance between asserting his rights and complying with the officer's commands, not allowing Officer White to intimidate him, and for following up this interaction with the proper legal action. At no point did Mr. Flanagan commit any crimes, and he was well within his rights to refuse to identify himself. There should never be a circumstance where a citizen ends up arrested for trying to help someone, and this is the second interaction on this channel where this has happened because a witness did not want to identify themselves. Mr. Flanagan's arrest was nothing short of retaliatory, and I have no doubt that he will fare well in the courtroom, even without representation. I commend Mr. Flanagan for having the courage and conviction to stand up for his rights and file a lawsuit. Be sure to give your support